Thank you everyone for joining us on this seminar on top things you need to know before fundraising with illustrious guests from our VC panel here. My name is Anton Xavier. I'm a director for life sciences early stage at SVB Bank. We are the lead bank for supporting life science companies in their early stage through banking and non-banking needs. But more importantly, I want to highlight the guests we have on the panel today, coming from a variety of different VC roles before we start the actual panel itself. So if I could get them to introduce themselves in the order I actually see them on the screen. So Greg, if you would like to give a very brief description of yourself and your VC.
Sure. Thanks, Anton, and thanks to the Benchling folks for having us. So I'm a partner at Menlo. We're a thesis-oriented early-stage venture firm. I lead our life science and healthcare investing. My background is mostly operating, 20 years of background in a variety of startups and later stage companies. And my focuses are really around therapeutics, mostly platform technologies, digital health, and kind of novel technologies. And we're very pleased to be investors in Benchling.
Thank you, Greg. Alex?
Sure. Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm Alex. I'm one of the partners here at IndieBio. We're a super early stage pre-seed accelerator focused on mostly life science across human and planetary health. So it could be across therapeutic platforms, diagnostics, digital health, and then food ag, biomaterials, carbon capture utilization, kind of you name it. Based here in San Francisco and part of a larger fund called SOSV, which focuses across a number of different program-based investment vehicles.
Thank you, Alex. Julie.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So my name is Julie Grant. I'm a general partner at Canaan, which is a tech and healthcare early stage venture fund. I exclusively focus on biopharmaceutical investing and occasionally take an operating role in companies that we incubate under the banner of the fund within the biopharma sector. It's great to be here.
Great. Thank you to our panelists. And I just want to highlight the topic again. It's top things you need to know before you fundraise, right? So a lot of postdocs, a lot of early stage companies have this idea that, they're going to start a company and instantly get funded or instantly be introduced to VCs. And it's going to be a whirlwind of getting a seed and Series A and a lot of introductions to VCs. However, there's a lot that goes into creating a company before you can attract a VC. And that's what we're really going to highlight today is what do you need to do before you reach out to VC? So you have the confidence that you have everything within your deck, within your structure of a company that enables the investors to look on you seriously and not ignore you as you start to do your investor roadshows. And with that, I'd like to start with the first question of what traits and abilities do you look for in founding teams in that early stage? Are there unique characteristics? Can you give examples? I'll start with you, Julie.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think that one thing that I think is important to think about as you start your venture is complementary expertise on your team to round out your own skill set to be able to accomplish your early stage milestones. You don't have to necessarily build the entire company in a day, but I think what we look for, since we're not often dropping in every company to fill the operating roles ourselves as venture capitalists, is we're trusting the management team and the founders to be able to get the job done. And so I think that being reflective on your own skills and rounding out your team early on is critically important in terms of trying to raise capital today.
That's a great point. I mean, it obviously it takes a village. You need cross-functional teams across not only science, but business as well. Greg, Alex, I just want to get your thoughts on that. In terms of putting these teams together, a lot of these scientists come from science labs, so they're pretty much even if they're not an Ivy League, they're certainly in an ivory tower, right? Trying to get these other people involved. What advice do you have to get them to find these business people, other people that can complement their scientific skills? And if there's other things that you look for in founding teams, certainly welcome to hear here on that as well. So Greg, Alex, any thoughts?
I'd say from my perspective, I do think networking is a really important skill to develop as a prospective entrepreneur. You know, the ability to find people with different skill sets, as Julie was mentioning, I think is absolutely important. But oftentimes those complementary skill sets are not sitting right in front of you or next door to you in the lab. They might be at your institution, they might be elsewhere, but building that network of people across the country, across the world who have common interests, you know, I think is a really important part of building eventually that network that will lead to the team, it will lead to the connections, you know, will lead to many things that you may not even anticipate at the time when you're forming those relationships. But investing the time in building those relationships really does pay back in spades later on.
Thank you, Greg. Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely double down on everything Julie and Greg said as being really good advice. The other two things I would have, and it will depend a bit on kind of the sector. One of the first is we have had quite a few people who've come from academia as founders who've actually been CEOs and made really good CEOs. So that's not always the case. I think it takes a fair amount of introspection and self-awareness around where are my skills and where do I want to develop my skills. But whether it's being a CEO or CSO, we often kind of, in our screening process, look for people who have a really fundamental desire kind of to seek the truth. And that can be around their science, around the market, around kind of the best way to build their company. So I think a really strong ability to have fast iterative cycles and questioning your own assumptions is something we look for in a number of ways.
Great, thank you, Alex. Greg, you mentioned something there around networking. So scientists, first-time founders, predominantly scientists, are really good at networking with other scientists, right? And they don't really know where to go to network with other people in the business. Like, so for example, CBO, CFO, or potential CEO. What kind of resources or conferences do you think would be ideal for them to attend to actually find those people? Or is it something within the university that they can find? Where are those resources? Because usually they're, you know, in hand with a pipette, know their next door neighbor, they know who's on the next scientific conference they had, they know the lead professors, but they don't know the serial entrepreneurs, they don't know the CBOs who have done licensing deals by the bucket load. But where do they find them?
Well, I think it's going to be different for every person. You know, I think there are definitely PIs who have more connections in the business world, who have been founders of companies themselves, you know, either in their institution or in their field, you know, who I think, you know, everybody wants to know those folks, you know, and many of them can be, you know, if you're interested in the same topic, can be quite generous with their time. I think there's also, you know, scientific meetings and conferences. There are, you know, VCs like us wandering around at those conferences, you know, and so finding a way to get to know some of them, you know, at presentations, even at poster sessions, you know, throughout the meetings, you know, there are people walking around who, you know, I go to a meeting, there's lots of people I don't know. I'm interested in meeting people. That's why I go. You know, people have definitely, you know, sometimes pick me out, sometimes I pick them out, but, you know, reaching out and having the conversation, you know, I honestly, you know, I don't necessarily think scientists are trained to network, right? There's a certain amount of networking through peer review that I think scientists are trained to do, but the softer skills of how do you build a relationship with people over time, you know, something I think that just takes practice for everybody. I'm a bit of an introvert myself, so I have to force myself to get out of my shell and, you know, go and meet new people. But, you know, it's always fun at the end when you're like, oh gosh, yeah, I learned something really interesting today.
That's a great thought there. Alex, Julie, do you have any thoughts on that? Scientific conferences, finding people there, any other conferences or any other resources where they can find people that can build their team?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Go
Julie.
for it, Alex.
Oh, okay. One thing I would add, if for folks who are still at their university, maybe still a PhD or a postdoc, a lot of universities are increasingly, you know, building entrepreneurship programs, have incubators, accelerators, and I would always encourage people to kind of start with lower stake conversation before they, you know, try to approach, you know, an industry executive as a mentor. So go out in places where there's other students who've started companies, where maybe MBAs or engineers are hanging out as well. So you can start learning to see how they communicate their ideas, how much they understand yours, and start building a foundation of kind of knowing startup lingo and financing conversations and all that.
Great. Julie?
I also think that LinkedIn is really powerful, but I think requires a lot more legwork. I have found that actually my response rates and vice versa on LinkedIn can be really helpful if the ask is very specific. I think what's a difficult ask to ask a VC or an expert about, or even a potentially, someone you want to talk to is, hey, let's get coffee. Don't ever ask anyone just to catch up. I actually think in today's really busy world, it's a really easy way to get ignored. I think if you can write a very specific email about why you want 15 to 20 minutes of their time, which sounds really light and will get you closer to getting a yes from someone, is often a good way to go. You just have to know why you're asking to talk to that person and what you're hoping to gain from it. And I actually find that people reply very often to those requests because they're going to be fulfilling.
That's a good question. Just a shotgun question on there. Following that, just need a quick answer from you. And this is something a lot of early stage companies do ask investors, is that they do send these emails out, but they get ghosted, and they don't get a reply. Any response to that? Just a couple of seconds. Is there anything that they can tailor their email in some manner that Julie, Alex, Greg could actually, is there something they can put secret in a subject line that will enable them to get a response?
Maybe I'll take this one since I was talking about replies. I think the first and foremost is we're not just evaluating whether or not someone has a great technology. We're trying to evaluate whether or not they can be a great CEO. And part of that, coming back to networking, is understanding how to get that intro. The number one way to get funded is an introduction from someone else in our network and to understand that. And so the way to get access is to get someone who has made money as an entrepreneur from Canaan or as a co-investor, or someone who works in one of our portfolio companies to make an introduction on their behalf. And that actually is the number one way to get funded, is to be in the network. And that's actually very doable if you think of it as second or third degree relations. My guess is that I have connections to tens of thousands of people by second degree, and they may be willing to write an introduction to say, hey, here's why I think this company is interesting and why you need to meet this person. I generally reply. So I think it's the cold emails that have no connection point that often are the most difficult.
That's incredibly interesting. So rather than be an evangelist for yourself, have someone who's connected to you that's been incredibly successful be an evangelist for yourself, for the company. That's where things start to heat up in terms of a potential relationship moving forward. Alex, Greg, any thoughts on that? Is that something before we move to the next question?
I would have one quick comment, and this isn't for if you're trying to get funding, but if you're trying to get mentorship and advice. Like what Julie said is great. When I was in grad school, actually, I used LinkedIn, had probably 50 conversations with people from industry, from like mid-level to pretty high-level management. And being a student, I found was like the superpower, because I didn't want anything from them except for mentorship. And a lot of those folks wanted to get it. So I think the spirit of giving back and continuing on is really high within industry.
Thank you, Alex. Greg, any thoughts on this before we move on?
Nope, I agreed with both those comments.
Great. Okay, so if we start moving into the actual company itself, right? So they've created something and they want to pitch this to you. From an R&D perspective and a non-R&D operational perspective, what do you want to see in that deck of a company before you consider investing in it? I mean, so obviously you want to see a good team. We've mentioned, cross-functional, cross-business functions. But you want to see some data, obviously, and then you want to see some kind of operational execution. Could you comment on the deck itself in terms of reviewing not only the R&D but the operations, what you like to see before you take it to the next round, which may be, let's say, a discussion under CDA. Greg, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the things that that I like to see. Yeah, I like to see a clear problem statement, right? What is it that why is it worth trying to do the thing that the entrepreneurs are trying to do? Every startup is hard, and so what makes this one worthwhile? And worth the energy and the sweat and the blood and the tears of the next several years. I like to see a team. I think we fund. I do think in biotech these days, the world is kind of divided into entrepreneurs, right? Many of the venture funds are only starting their own companies, right? Julie mentioned some of that, and I know her firm does some of both. But at Menlo, we really focus on finding entrepreneurs, right? And those entrepreneurs, they can't go to some firms. They just can't go to get funded, right? They're looking for to build those companies themselves. Here we don't do that, and so we really are looking for an entrepreneur that is going to come in and really get us excited about their vision, right? Get us excited about why it is that they're doing it, and about why that they're unique, right? And so the differentiation of the platform is also really important to us. What's going to allow a company in gene therapy to succeed when there are 400 programs that are nearing the clinic? That's that kind of being able to succinctly capture the differentiation. I think is important in that early meeting where I'm walking in probably without a lot of depth of understanding of what they've been spending years working on. How to communicate that quickly is I think a necessary skill to get that second meeting where I can go into more depth and I can learn more and be curious. In that first meeting, there has to be a lot of filtering, and that's kind of the two things that help trigger the filter.
Thank you, Greg. Alex, Julie, any thoughts on that?
I can get one thing for us. Again, it'll depend a bit on industry. I think we tend to look for, so many of our founders are also coming out of academia and spinning out, what is the fundamental insight? If they spent years of their PhD and their postdoc on it, whether it's a new way to make protein for human nutrition, whether it's a new therapeutic platform, using bacteria to convert carbon dioxide into a high value product, whatever that is, like what is kind of the fundamental insight that differentiates them is a really key part of it. And then we also look for kind of an operational plan that, given our funding model, is looking at, can we island hop with this company to put a small amount of money in with IndieBio's capital, and then help you out to one of these firms raise a seed round and kind of continue to kind of iteratively create value and build business models around that. So we don't expect people to have that all figured out, but we look for people who have that fundamental insight and a flexibility, adaptability to think through those next steps.
Thank you, Alex. Julie, any thoughts?
Yes, actually, it's interesting. What Alex said sparked something in my mind that I think is really important. There's a lot of different venture capitalists out there. And, if you think about what this panel represents, actually knowing who to go to and why you want their capital as a partner and how it fits in terms of a two-way street of our business of deploying our capital, but also returning the capital to our investors, and understanding our business is really important. So to Alex's point, if Alex is talking about island hopping and trying to find a seed that can go and have this really big acceleration, at Canaan, we only tend to do that in tech companies that are in consumer that have huge markups very, very quickly. I think for our life science portfolio in biopharma, we're generally writing $8 to $15 million first checks. And so part of that is because I'm trying to return an $800 million fund. And so I actually have to write bigger checks to return bigger amounts of capital. And I need to find businesses that I can return $200, $300 million back after years of capital and dilution going in. And so, understanding how your business aligns or does not align with an investor's job as an investor is actually critically important to you finding a good mutual fit as a founder. And I think, frankly, will also make your fundraising a lot more efficient. So you're talking to the right people from the start.
Yeah, that's a great point, Julie. Actually doing your research, finding which companies or which VCs, which capital raising entities are strategically aligned to the technologies of value, incredible value and a good exercise for scientific founders.
Maybe I could tie that back to Julie's earlier comment about getting the introduction, right? Because I do think that that's the introduction serves two purposes, right? One that someone can get onto my radar through somebody that I know, but also so that person who presumably knows me also can help to match the right entrepreneur with what I'm interested in, right? I think that's a really important point, that every investor has differences, right? There's differences in what we're all excited about or looking for or can help with, really focus on versus, not as important to us. And so finding that right match, right? An investment really is marriage without the possibility of divorce, right? You're with this person for a long time. And so you would never imagine, the blind date leading to you would never get married to somebody without getting to know them really well. Right. And it's that part of that process of that, even the introduction, right? Who to spend time with. It should be someone who not only, has money, but is someone who actually is a good match for you as a person or as an entrepreneur, or, and vice versa. So another reason why the introduction can be really important.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. Well, there was one point, there was a point that was made by Greg, Alex, and I believe Julie as well, around platform and platform technologies. Just a quick fire question here. Yes or no? Do you guys invest in platform technologies versus single drug companies? Yes to platform, no to a single drug? Well, what's the thoughts right now in terms of the market? Julie?
I'm yes and yes. I do both.
Oh, great. Alex?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it. Quick fire questions. Go for it.
Yes to platform, very, very rarely yes to single molecules. It typically doesn't fit our business model.
Okay, Greg?
We focus primarily on platforms.
Okay, so that's good to know from a startup perspective as to what the company should be focused on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a single entity company or a single asset company can actually raise money. Obviously, Julie mentioned that they look at both. But now, if we start doing a little bit of a deeper dive on decisions to help accelerate R&D through critical milestones and how they can gain additional funding, what successful patterns do you see in terms of data management, R&D operations, do you see from these companies that actually accelerate their milestones to the next round of funding? Is it, I mean, obviously it's good execution, it's good management, but are there other things in there that enable a company to move forward faster? Is there some guidance that you give these companies to ensure that they move to the next milestone faster? Who would like to take this question? I think Greg, start with you.
Well, I guess for us, we actually think about it as we think about 5 Ps. Actually, we think about to have some amount of balance and some amount of distribution of progress. So I think one is the program, right? To have a lead program that is clearly articulable, that's hitting its milestone, that's making good progress towards the clinic. And to evaluate that in the same traditional way that has been evaluated on that. We layer on that the platform, right? How defensible, how differentiated is that platform? Is that platform going to produce the third P is our portfolio, right? But multiple molecules, multiple medicines, maybe across therapeutic areas. And then partnerships is our fourth one, right? Do we and because we like platforms, we also actually like partnerships quite a bit, right? Can you take a broad platform, use some of the products of that platform and get them to the clinic faster using other people's money or other people's resources? And then the last one is people, right? Are they building the right team to be able to go to the next level? I think it's those 5 that drives our evaluation, that drives what we coach our our teams on in terms of how they get to the next level.
Thank you, Greg. Alex, Julie, any other thoughts on this?
I'll talk about maybe our approach a little bit to non-therapeutic companies, because I think Greg and Julie are such experts there. For a lot of our companies in different areas of the world, whether agriculture, food, or materials, or even digital health or something, for us, we really look at what is kind of the minimum viable experiment that these companies can do. So one example from years back, actually, one of the first cellular agriculture companies we funded, Clara Foods. Now they just raised like a Series C or something like that, rebranded, and they're looking at making egg whites without the animal using fermentation. And a very fundamental question is, before you start doing strain engineering, do some bioreactors, do all that, like if you were to buy these proteins off the shelf and recombine them, can you actually make them separately and recapitulate your product? And doing an experiment like that to save you 5 years of scientific work to show like, does your fundamental idea work? That's something we look at doing across the board. So how can you use the least amount of tech and technology, tech and time to show a proof of concept?
Thank you, Alex. Julie.
I think data management is actually a bigger issue that people don't talk about a lot. And it's really complicated. So I would just say that I'm currently the acting CEO of a company that we're starting at discovery stage, and we are actually bringing in an entire remote head of IT to help set up our CCD databases, because we're concerned about whether or not, as we scale, whether or not our data will be stored correctly, retrievable, searchable, and scalable. And I think that's incredibly important, because in the end, whether or not you're doing a clinical trial or a series of scientific bench experiments, really your product is the data and the IP. And so how you invest in that and organize in that, I think, does matter. It tends to not be what we diligence in a lot of our companies at Hello, because we're so focused on product. But it can actually be the difference between what breaks a company as they start to actually try to execute. And it becomes a really big problem for management. The board is not going to, generally speaking, be micromanaging how you set up your data infrastructure. But if it doesn't go right, it will show up in your company in really bad ways. And so I would just say that's one of the things that you have to learn how to invest in from an operational perspective. And I would find someone who has done it 10 times before and just pay them to do it as a consultant for you if you have not done it already.
Oh, that's a great point, Julie. I know there's a lot of early stage companies on here and scientists on here that typically have written data and calculations on napkins. And that's how things are done in a lab, in an academic lab. Doesn't work in the real world, and certainly need to record all of that data as you go toward the FDA clearance.
Thank goodness for benchling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, seriously, I'll also add one more, which I think is like something we have learned about the hard way is, when you're filing IP, like that piece of paper is your primary document if you write a scaffold on it, or that becomes part of the paper trail, and you have to keep that piece of paper forever. So I think that tracking things digitally in the right way will save you a lot of hassle later on, as it takes 10 years for things to get to approval, and you actually have to document it through lawsuits. So I will just say, think digital early.
That's a great point, Julie. I'm going to take a very cynical view of a scientist, right? So there's this group, or let's say Group X, Company X, Group Y, whoever. They've spoken to 100 VCs, got nowhere, right? Then they come to us or come to another group, and they put their hands up and say, look, hey, the only companies that get funded are the ones that are in Harvard or MIT or Stanford, and they're all with the Church Lab, or they're all with the Luke Cantley Lab, or they're all with the Doudna Lab. And those are the only ones that get funded. We're not going to get funded because we're not, part of that group. We're not part of that clique. We're not in that country club, as it were. And when you look at, who's doing the deals and who gets the money, that kind of cynical statement does ring true to a certain aspect, right? So is that true? I mean, do VCs overlook companies that don't come from rockstar PI labs or rockstar universities or is there some kind of preferred a priority review of companies that come from these rock star PIs or high level universities? What can a PI or scientist who doesn't come from that environment, what can they do to actually to get a deal, to have a second meeting with you guys? Julie, if you'd like to go first. Sorry to stick you with that question first.
It's okay. I think it's harder. I think we have to admit that it's harder. I think it would be disingenuous to say that it is easier equals easy to come out of a lab that does not have the same recognition. But I would say the recognition is because there has been, in many cases for these investigators and their labs, repeat financial success and repeat, at least in the pharmaceutical industry, not only the formation of successful companies, but the approval of products. And I will say, at least for Canaan, we not only track who is creating great companies, but actually what translates, because there are some repeat investigators that actually the science has not translated repeatedly. And so we do not fund their companies. So I think it can go both ways. Because in the end, I think that we're in these companies for the long haul. To answer your question directly, what do you do? I think that the degree of validation that you can have by bringing a great team around you is tremendous. Interestingly, I think part of the benefit of coming out of those labs is because it becomes a gravitational pool for talent. In the end, being able to recruit an exceptional team is in fact one of the hardest things of our business and one of the greatest determinants of success. So if you can show me that people will follow you, will become your advisor, will give you time, and maybe quit their job to join you, there is no better validation than that in the market to capture my attention.
Thank you, Julie. Great. Alex, any thoughts on that? Or additional comments?
I can comment a little bit around, again, looking at who is your VC, because I think IndieBio, we're at just a different stage and style of company than I think larger firms like Canaan and Menlo, and there's a reality to that really matters. For us, we funded a number of teams out of kind of the most prestigious institutions. They're great teams, and we're really happy to have done it. We've also done a ton of so-called geographic arbitrage. We have some amazing teams out of Argentina, out of Egypt, across Canada, North America, and sometimes we see teams that are spending 20% of the money to have 10 times more PhDs on their staff because they're in a different geography and they're still great scientists. They do go and have to fundraise from maybe a different swath of investors. There's a reality of the funding world, but I think there is a lot of capital out there. And the other part of that for us is the same way as like a therapeutics company might really need a key in on kind of indication selection to start. We think a lot about like, what is your industry selection? So maybe if you've always thought about therapeutics, stick with that. But if you're looking a bit broader, because we fund broader, so self-interested in saying it, like other industries might have a different type of requirement for where you come from a little bit to some extent. But I still think a lot of what Julie said holds very, very true in terms of hiring and getting other folks on board.
Greg, we have 2 minutes. Just want to get to the final question, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. I think that comes back to networking, right? Building relationships, right? Being able to lead, requires you to build trust, right? And build relationships with a broad swath of people. And fundamentally, I feel like research is about that, right? Peer review is fundamentally trying to get other people to buy into your ideas, right? Based on the evidence that you can produce. And so being able to leverage that and to grow that into a network of supporters, will ultimately, and I agree with Julie, it's more difficult, but it is something that can be done as you build that network and build those set of relationships.
Thank you, Greg. So with a final question, if you could just answer this in just one quick sentence. If there's one key piece of advice you could give to a founder seeking funding, what would that be? Just in about 10 words or 20 words or less. Start with you, Greg.
Love what you do.
Thank you. Alex?
I'll go with never give up.
Great. Julie.
Build around yourself.
Oh, wow. Did you say build around yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Wow. Yes. So thank you guys for this great discussion. Hopefully this has been incredibly insightful for the audience. I mean, some of the take-home points here are, I really like that build around yourself point. Really boils down to networking. It takes a village to build a company. You're a scientist. You need to know other people to actually move this company forward cross-functionally. And by cross-functionally, I mean across business functions, not just R&D, but also business, possibly legal, possibly clin dev as well. So that's one aspect. Trying to get to know these guys like Greg, Alex, Julie. Cold emails don't seem to work, right? So you're going to have to network like hell to get someone to evangelize for you that they already know. So this is a warm handshake. This is not a cold email. You can't do that. And then data management. So, really organizing your company from the get-go is incredibly important. Understanding your data, putting it down in electronic records is going to be incredibly important to move that company forward. And then I love the points of love what you do and never give up. Obviously, you have to be aligned perfectly with your technology. This can't be something that you just picked at random from a tech transfer office and you think you're going to spin it out because you think it's looks good. You need to have some passion around what you're doing there, and certainly never give up. You're going to be getting a lot of rejection from VCs. That's part and parcel of the game, but it's the people who actually just stay in and make the connections and find a way to get those rock star PIs and rock star repeat entrepreneurs, not only to join a team, but also to give those kind of warm introductions to Greg, Alex, and Julie that are going to be successful in the long run. Any final thoughts from you guys before we close up?
I just want to say that I think entrepreneurship is so much fun. And so I think that this is going to sound funny, but enjoy the ride. Like really enjoy the ride. Enjoy the small things. Enjoy the t-shirt competition. Enjoy the little piece of data that gives you hope. Enjoy drinks with people. Enjoy the random encounters at a conference, waiting in line for a badge. And just sometimes that ends up being magic. And I will just say that a lot of my co-founders and some of the companies I've incubated have been through chance. And so you have to be open to chance. And it can be a really incredible, magical ride.
Wow. Anything else, guys? Greg, Alex?
Just wanted to say thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you as well. I would say the one thing that I've learned most probably from IndieBio and the hundreds of entrepreneurs here is the power of community. So surround yourself with other people with similar values and goals and who can support each other kind of through the good times and the bad. I think it makes a huge, huge difference.
Thank you, Alex. I'll now pass it over to Benchling so we can move on to the next session.